After many years of waiting, the classic Saw franchise with John Kramer is back. So let's see if it's good right now.
You will want to remain alert.
Welcome everyone back to the channel. Before we get started talking about Saw X, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, helps out a lot. But to preface before this video, can we talk about how much of a menace Billy is? Like, gosh dang, Billy is such a menace these days. For the marketing of this movie, the Saw Twitter account has been posting Billy just going to Vegas, just taking pictures, drinking so much alcohol, just going around on his tricycle, and just doing all these things while his dad, John Kramer, is just killing people. I swear, Billy is the most messed up puppet I've ever seen. He is just so messed up. He's such a menace. I think Billy needs to be stopped. I don't know how he's getting away with all this, but I don't know. Billy in this movie also, he's a menace. He just rides around on his tricycle, has no care in the world. He just doesn't care what's going on. His dad, John Kramer, just kills all these people, and Billy just goes along with it. I think that we all need to stop Billy once and for all. Take Billy down. He's a crazy guy, and he's having too much fun. He's really having too much fun, man. But Saw X comes to theaters this weekend. It's already in theaters when you're watching this, and Saw X basically takes us on the journey with John Kramer. This movie takes place between Saw 1 and Saw 2, so I can't really spoil you for the other Saws, so don't worry about that. I won't really spoil what happens in this one, but John Kramer does survive, so that's a spoiler, I guess, if you didn't know already. John Kramer in this one, he travels to Mexico for a risky cure on his cancer, and basically it doesn't end up how he likes it, and they kind of cheated him out of all of his money, so he tries to get revenge on all these fake doctors, the con artists, as we would say. So this one actually, I think the premise of this one is very smart because you can fit it in those two movies because it really doesn't have any consequences to go into that, because John Kramer does survive and goes on for another two movies, let's say that. So yeah, I feel like this story works because it really doesn't matter how it ends up, because John Kramer is going to make it out either one way or another. And I do kind of like how this is kind of a revenge story. I do like those revenge stories. And it makes me just not care so much more about why John Kramer is hurting these people and what he does, because they're kind of bad people and they're conning him out of money. Even though John Kramer is kind of also a bad guy, you do really care about John Kramer a little bit more in this one because he's getting conned this time. So you want him to actually con these people and do this revenge to people. Let's get into the good first, the traps. The traps are gnarly in this one. They're not the most gnarly traps you have seen in the Saw franchise. I feel like Saw 3 has some of the most gnarly traps in the series. Saw 2 also. Saw 1 also a classic. But I will say this is probably the best Saw movie since Saw 1 in my opinion. But I mean, is that really a hard thing to get, a hard margin to cross? Because all the Saw movies after 4 are really not great. I'm actually a big defender of Spiral. I think Spiral's pretty cool, but I think all the rest are pretty terrible. Especially Saw 3D, one of the worst movies I think I've ever seen. And the traps in this one, as I said, they go crazy. There's literally some very odd traps in here, and there's some very graphic traps in here. I'm not really going to talk about them full on depth, but I will say that one of the traps when this guy has to do like open brain surgery on himself is pretty graphic, and then one of them where this lady has to saw off her own leg is really graphic. Just oh my goodness, it makes me squirm just thinking about it. And the eyeball trap is pretty cool in this one too, even though it's not really in it for too long. I feel like the traps here are awesome. Even though, you know, you go into a horror movie, you're thinking it's fake and all that, you still kind of squirm at the feeling of all this stuff because it kind of just tingles all the bones that are getting messed with in the movie. I feel like this one and Evil Dead Rise are some of the movies that made me squirm the most in the theater this year. They're just kind of insane and how they just take it to these extreme highs. It's crazy. And I will say the famous Saw score and the editing are actually back in this one, and I really like that a lot. I love that Saw score and the editing of this movie, the crazy editing, like zoom out, zoom in. That's just crazy, and I love that from like the first original 3 Saw movies. They hold a special place in my heart. I actually did binge watch like all 9 of them in one day. It was actually a crazy day. I wouldn't really recommend it, but it was certainly an experience. And the third act twist of this movie was just so awesome. I love when you get these Saw movies and then the twist kicks in and then the score kicks in. such an awesome time to have that back, you know, because sometimes the Saw movies, they have those twists at the end. Sometimes they're laughable, sometimes they're really cool. I found this one to be pretty cool, and I was happy when it did happen because that score kicked in. You're like, oh yeah, I love this. This is like kind of just taking it back all the way to the original. Just remind you of Saw 1, back at it again. I have a decent, I will say the bad in this movie was the first act was pretty slow. You know, you have a lot of build up to do in this one, and I feel like that wasn't really needed. I don't really need a lot of build up for a Saw movie because all the other Saw movies, you get right into this one. You get right into the traps and all the other ones. You get right into the story. And this one, you really have a slow build up. It's like kind of like 30 minutes until you're really at one trap, which I was kind of disappointed about because that isn't really how I remember a Saw movie. And this one, I think, might be the longest one. So just get ready for that. And I kind of wish the traps, even though they are pretty gnarly, I wish they really went to a farther extent because it has been, you know, a couple years, and so I feel like you could have done a little bit more and made them a little more graphic, because I still think some of the earlier Saw movies have more graphic traps and kind of make you squirm a little bit more. If you're gonna go all out, want to do a Saw X, I feel like you should have gone so all out for the traps in this one. Even though I did think the traps are great, I feel like you should have gone more out in this one. And this movie is kind of corny. You know, all the Saw movies have some corny moments, and they're just kind of corny movies, but I don't think this one is the most corny of them. I feel like the first act is pretty corny. Some of the acting isn't great, but Tobin Bell coming back as John Kramer can't get much better than that. You know, he's the main lead of the film. That's what makes a Saw film special, is John Kramer behind the mask. And you got Amanda coming back. It was cool to see Amanda back, of course, because this one takes place way in the past, so it was cool to have her back here. But I felt like the first act was a little too corny for me, even though Saw movies are kind of special because they are kind of corny in that way. But overall, Saw X was a fun time. You know, I loved being back inside this universe with John Kramer and all the Saw traps and Billy, but he's a menace. Get that right. But yeah, I loved how this movie was marketed. I loved kind of the trailers for this movie, and I just loved seeing all the Saw fans back inside the theater. It's such a cool experience, but I will say it does have some flaws. It's a little slow. It's a little corny at times, of course. So Saw X, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I did enjoy it a lot, but I probably don't see myself going back to this until I do a rewatch. I do think the first 3 are pretty special, and I feel like this one will fit inside those 3 in a pretty big way. So I'll probably watch it again when I watch all the first 3 again. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you guys did watch Saw X. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.